Hey folks, welcome to the Freakopolis Times, our podcast mostly about stuff related to our comics and game shop, the Freakopolis Geekery. We're Ian, Tyler, and Troy, and we run the shop and talk to people all the time, just like in this podcast. Join us and some occasional guests as we talk comics, games, pop culture, and just about anything else that pops up. Remember, while some of our topics may get a little geeky, they change up pretty often, so hang in there and maybe the next one will be more your style. By the way, this podcast is video enhanced on YouTube and Spotify. Check it out that way if you like visuals with your talk. You never know what might show up. Now, let's do the show.
There's actually a lot that's happened over the past week. I feel like we have a plethora of worthy topics. Wizards had their show. HBO had their show. There's a few other things.
Wizards of the Coast, sort of revealing their upcoming stuff.
Yeah, some stuff for like the next few years, actually. The beginnings of the next edition of D&D. One D&D. Dun dun dun!
One D&D.
Yeah, that's what they're calling it.
They're going to reinvent it. It's probably going to be like D&D 4. It's going to have cards and video game aspects.
As many microtransactions as they can fit
Yes.
in a role-playing game. I did see people were getting upset over the fact that they're releasing this 5.5e as a book with a price tag on it. As if this was something different from what Wizards has done for the past 60 years.
Oh, they wanted somewhat new, a supplement that was just how to update 5.0.
Yeah, your adaptation guide. Yeah, but instead it is, as far as they're concerned, legitimately a new edition. And like 3.5 was the same deal.
Sure.
And 3.5 ended up being pretty definitive for like a whole decade, And people who didn't play 4 played 3.5. I'm hoping 5.5 or 1 D&D won't end up in that same circumstance where everyone's like, some people like 5.5, but I stick with 5.
The only books I didn't buy for D&D were the
4th
D&D
edition.
4th edition books.
Yeah.
But going from 3.0 to 3.5, you had to rebuy all the books again. Of course, going to 5.0 or 5e, again, rebuy all the books.
Absolutely. It's part of the strategy as a whole, for sure. 4th edition, it did have the occasional redeeming quality. It turned martial classes a lot more fun to play. It was so combat focused, it was practically a miniatures battle game in a way. Mm-hmm. But you can still see the littlest strands of its DNA in 5th edition, where they gave fighters and paladins and monks and stuff a much wider range of choices in what they do turn by turn, instead of just swinging the sword and hoping for a crit.
And so there was news both on the 5.5 and 1 D&D.
1 D&D.
6.0 is...
No, they're the same thing. 5.5 and 1 D&D are going to be... That's the same product.
Okay.
They're not calling it 6th edition, so everyone's kind of been caught up in the terminology, for sure. But there is already a good little chunk of controversy surrounding this. What a surprise. People have to whip up the means to generate 1 million forum posts filled with vile.
So, I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the detail in the future, but what's the current, place that people are at with this? They're complaining about...
I think there's, a lot to appreciate for sure, and actually you're able to see the very first taste of this rule set in, what's the name of this system?
Spelljammer.
I always, Starfinder, Spelljammer, Spellfinder. There's a million different 2-word combos that come to my head, and I can never put together Spelljammer. But that's what we have. Yeah, there's the new Spelljammer books. Some really beautiful covers and art in that 3-book combo. Yeah.
Set.
Yeah, really beautiful for sure. But within there, you got a little taste of the new rulings for critical hits.
Which is very interesting. Only weapon attacks and unarmed strikes can crit.
Not abilities or spells, which means a paladin's smite, a rogue's sneak attack, a wizard's firebolt, all these things no longer crit if you run rules as written for 1 D&D or Starfinder.
That's definitely
Spelljammer. Yeah.
That definitely changes things up for warlocks. All the spellcasters that have like cantrip or first level spells that require a 2-hit roll have historically received crit bonuses.
Indeed.
On those to hit.
And paladins roll to hit and then retroactively turn it into a smite once they see that it's a crit. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not as viable an option, I suppose, And not being able to get sneak attacks or the critical hit sneak attack seems to be rather counterintuitive. You know?
That's not the only strange ruling that they seem to include in little text boxes in the corner in the Spelljammer, though. One of the other ones, obviously Spelljammer, astral sort of space ships, galleons. They're going to have cannons or ballistas or catapults and stuff on them. And
some of them are living ships, the nautiloids and stuff,
You're going to want to be able to use those ships and their weapons. But the book sort of just says, you're going to be playing your characters, so we're not going to include any stuff about that. If you're going to be doing ship-to-ship combat, you're going to be using your bow rather than a ballista.
Let's back up a little bit, because we were talking about 5th edition moving to 5.5 or 1 D&D.
Sure.
Spelljammer, in case people out there are unaware, Spelljammer is the latest D&D release, which came out this past week or within the last couple of weeks. And as guys mentioned, it only comes in a slipcase 3-book and Game Master screen setup. It delivered both as the regular cover, which we'll be able to see for years to come, and the alt cover, which only delivers in that very first release. I don't think it's available. The alt cover is no longer available from distributors. So whoever has copies of the alt cover out there, game shops and such that have copies of the alt cover, can make those available until they run out, but they won't be able to get more.
But in general, it's the sci-fi adaptation of Dungeons and Dragons.
So the slipcase holds, like I said, the 3 books, and oddly, they're hardcover books with beautiful covers and beautiful art, and we'll talk some more about that. But it's interesting that the 3 books, one of them is an adventurer's guide, one of them is sort of a bestiary for this new environment, this Spelljamming environment, and one of them is a campaign module. Mm-hmm. And the weird part about that is the campaign module that it comes with starts at player level 5 and runs 5 to 8. So it does leave sort of the question, how do I get my characters up to level 5?
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe you'd have to build 5th level characters. It's also interesting that the books deliver in this case, every one of the books is a 64-page book.
Yeah.
I've never seen that happen before, where they deliver all of the books as exactly the same size.
Somehow they managed to organize that within production. And not only that, but the material, at least on the alternative art, more limited edition set, I can't testify to the other one because we only got as many of the alternative art ones as we could.
Right.
But the material used, not only on the covers and stuff, the hardcovers and the print, but the paper itself, very thick, very high quality, really, really beautiful, glossy ink, really, really ridiculously nice art throughout.
Yeah, the art is, in many cases, they reuse some of the stuff from the original Spelljammer because there was a version of Spelljammer that came out for D&D 3.5. They reused a bunch of things, and almost like all of the ship types and stuff that are used are recreations from that version. However, like all of the character races and all the other information in there is new. But the art quality is phenomenal. They really did a great job of revisualizing, kind of using the new approaches to art. It very much resembles something you would see in Magic the Gathering cards.
Sure,
or,
yeah.
You know, like the best artists producing the nicest looking sci-fi fantasy blends that I've ever seen. And like Ian said, the paper and texture qualities, the paper is so thick. I thought these books were probably 120, 130 page books.
They're kind of on the smaller end, but they're dense with content for sure.
And the art is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The art, can't say enough good things about the art.
I suppose returning to the inner workings of these books and kind of what people are finding to be interesting about them, we went over the critical hit ordeal there. There changes in that rules. The other big thing that we've seen upcoming for 1D&D or 5.5 or whatever you want to call it is changes to their approach with racial attributes. They don't want to box races into any sort of corner anymore and say, there used to be commonly statements like dwarves lean towards lawful good. They have a natural tendency to be lawful good. And they want to shy away from kind of putting races into a corner like that. Funnily enough, however, within the Spelljammer core books, you find that the GIF, the mercenary hippo people of Spelljammer.
Oh yeah, I saw those guys, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome, actually. Some of their design and their art in those books is absolutely fantastic. Like, I love these characters, but they are naturally inclined towards using firearms, seemingly for utterly unexplained magical reasons. And it's like, so you can't box a race into a corner by saying that they mostly lean towards good, but you can say that these guys
love guns.
Out of the ether, have a racial tendency to love guns.
This is already, so we're already talking about the introduction of different things in addition to that type of player character. Is it a player character?
You
It's
can
a player
be,
race,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
player race.
But also guns. I don't. There's no guns defined in 5e, is there?
Sure, there's alternative rules for them.
Alternative,
Yeah.
but like in the official rules,
No, generally not.
right?
It's not in the weapons chart in the player's handbook.
Right, but there are in
Yeah,
Spelljammer.
muskets.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just a setting difference, though. The GIF have been long known to make use of firearms and stuff, and so it is an established part of their culture. But now, instead of saying that it's their culture to use guns, they just say that they have this
Tendency.
unexplained magical affinity for them. All of them do. It's like, is that better? Is that a better way to handle this?
I think they're confused about how to handle it. Frankly, the idea that dwarves used to lean toward lawful good and now they can be anything. I thought that was not so much about race as it was about society.
Yeah. And
Right.
player choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dwarven society was structured in a way that favored lawful good, and apparently it no longer is. Dwarves can be anything.
Yeah, well, it's up to the DM to have dwarven clans and stuff, but when the player is making their character, they don't want anything to suggest that they have to put themselves in a particular box. Because there are neutral evil dwarves. Hell yeah, there are. There would be in any of my campaigns and stuff.
I'm playing one.
Yeah, right? Yeah. That can totally exist, and they don't want to dissuade players from exploring those possibilities just because of the race they chose. And I understand that. And yet, that's the reason for the controversy behind this feature of the GIF, is that they love guns just because they're GIF. It's not that big a deal for me. I think these books are awesome and that the setting is cool. I definitely like to roll up a character, and maybe it would be a GIF. But I do see people's point when they nitpick online, saying, you said you were going to do one thing, but here in your most recent attempt, we see another thing entirely.
Interestingly, the paper that comes with the Spelljammer box set indicates that it includes everything you need to play Adventures in Space. I haven't yet determined if it's true that you don't need the rest of
the player's
D&D
handbook.
book.
And yeah.
Well, they mean, to play Spelljammer, Adventures in Space.
Yeah, that may very well be the case.
You'd still need, it's still D&D.
Asterisk with addition to your entire D&D collection.
Right, exactly.
They also, I noticed in terms of the ships were originally designed, back all that time ago, D&D 3.0, 3.5, whenever it was. And the inside of them were very much like a sort of blocky constructed dungeon, like the maps used to be on grid paper. Even though, like, the nautiloid is a very organic looking shape and ship, but inside it has these blocky structures with, doors, like standard doors and stuff, mapped out to a grid. And they maintained those exact same maps for the insides of these ships. So that'll be interesting to see. The nice part is that means I can break out my old ship cards and they'll still work for the new Spelljammer.
True. That's not the only stuff that Wizards was showing off, though. They also spoke of their upcoming Magic sets, which they gave some hints towards some of the art in their Lord of the Rings set, much anticipated by countless collectors, I'm sure. And then they revealed that there's also going to be a Doctor Who set, which is going to make for an absolute cluster of IPs on the table.
That was kind of a shocker that they're,
That was unexpected, yeah.
Another licensed IP. They've got to pay somebody to be running Doctor Who.
I equipped the sonic screwdriver to the Witch Queen of Agnum.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And the art for the Lord of the Rings one that they showed off, a reimagined Pelennor Fields that you could get through the art cards that you would normally get in set boosters. What fan wouldn't want to piece together that imagery? It's super freaking stunning. But the sets that they're going to have that are so IP specific are definitely going to turn the game into a different sort of battlefield.
Yeah, I mentioned that it reminds me a lot more of HeroClix, which is a game which is traditionally based on licensed IPs. Yeah, getting mashed together. And, we see all of those different figures on the table when we play HeroClix. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to be that same experience for Magic the Gathering. It'd be interesting to see if they come out with some dedicated commander decks that are specifically for Doctor Who.
I believe that is the case. Yeah. That should be. I wouldn't know what to expect, to say the least.
So a lot of the times we talk about new stuff released for the store, new products that came in, new things that are starting up, new games that are coming out, new games that are getting the hype. And we don't mention a lot of things that sort of mysteriously disappear. They're not canceled necessarily. They just stop being produced or available from the distributors. Yeah. And we don't really tend to have an answer for our customers and community that play those games. Just all of a sudden it's difficult for us to get any more of those things in. And some of the examples for that would be Star Wars Destiny.
Yes.
Star Wars Destiny was a super popular sort of card and dice game.
Yeah, collectible TCG pretty much. But its run was short-lived, I suppose. And sure as hell, they'll still give you a starter kit.
Yeah.
But there's no more production for that game. Like, there's no loose packs or anything to buy. Which is a sorry state for it to be in. And funnily enough, now we find the Star Wars Fantasy Flight RPG game also is in limited production, or they aren't making more and don't have more to distribute.
Exactly. You can't get the books.
What the hell, Star Wars?
Well, it's Fantasy Flight and Asmodee.
Yep.
Asmodee, a huge distributor of board games and many other types of games, tabletop games. They acquired Fantasy Flight along with so many other tabletop manufacturers. And right now, for whatever reason, they're not printing the core rule books. We're still sort of waiting to see if we can get copies of the core rule books. We've got a new Star Wars RPG campaign running. We want to support that, but it's very, very difficult to get the stuff required in order to play that game. I see, sets of a simple set of dice that would normally be $12 to $15 for that game. They're specialty dice. They're not printed normally. They have their own specific icons related to the game, and those are selling for $100 or more on eBay. You can't get them.
It's extortion. It's like going to Jabba the Hutt for your RPG.
Well, and they never give you the heads up that, hey, we're not going to be producing any more of this stuff, and it's going to be difficult to get. And what we had, we kind of knew when we started to see a lot of online orders from around the country.
Yeah, from California.
Buying up the last of the books that we had on our shelves. And then we went after the distributor to try to get more and finding out that we can't get more. They're saying maybe we can get some more for that game in, 2 or 3 months' time. But that seems pretty loose. There's no commitment. There's no guarantee.
There's definitely demand, though. People are playing this game. They need the books.
If the dice are that expensive, I can only imagine people are trying to get their hands on them.
Yeah, for real.
Oh, yeah. People want to play it, but they can't. And there's other examples of these games that sort of mysteriously disappear. I mean, a very popular game in our shop was Keyforge, another collectible card game. It was from Richard Garfield, the original designer of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, it had some pedigree behind it, for sure. And it was interesting. It was kind of, instead of having a life total or health total and racing to the bottom to defeat your enemies, you raced to the top in Keyforge and tried to build up resources and stuff. And there was no deck building to it. You just bought decks, opened them, and they had individually AI-generated card backs and
figures, like images on them.
Yeah, all sorts of...
It was really cool.
Every deck had its own name, and every card had the name of that deck printed on it.
Some cool aspects to it, for certain, but I believe the pandemic and its inability to kind of wedge in between the other super serious card games that people love left it in the dust a little, but doesn't that have a new edition actually releasing soon?
Well, even more so than the pandemic, there was something weird that happened.
Yeah.
The card creating process, because of the unique names to the decks and the specifics being printed on every card in your deck, apparently the software to pull that off maybe got deleted.
Became self-aware.
Got sabotaged.
Right. Hated its own game.
Yeah. Something happened.
I
don't
want to play Keyforge.
It was no longer possible to produce new Keyforge decks. So even if they wanted to, which I believe they did, they couldn't do it anymore.
Wow.
So now there's a company involved, the company that used to do the specialty printing process involved in this, a company called Ghost Galaxy. They've acquired the rights to Keyforge. They've acquired the right to build the software again to create these decks. And, Keyforge players and retailers they've reached out to them and said, hey, we're coming back. You can expect more decks, more sets, more houses for that to be created. And again, it is going to be distributed by Asmodee. So, once available, Asmodee will make them available to the retailers that have access to that. I don't know. For us, it could be too little, too late. they were on the hype train for a while. We were doing well. We were doing tournaments. We were doing campaigns. But now it is would have to be all relit again. And Magic the Gathering has kind of stepped into that role in our shop as well as many others. They've got a challenge ahead of them to rekindle that. And that's what happens when these games become, when they just disappear and become unavailable. So we talked a little bit earlier about Lord of the Rings coming to Magic the Gathering. And you have to wonder how that is involved with the new owners of that IP.
Yeah, we had mentioned in, I believe it was last episode or maybe the one before it, that there was a big acquisition with Tomb Raider being grabbed by Embracer Group. And that was notable enough for us to talk about. Well, they made another big acquisition in the following week with the entirety of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. All of the ages, all the slices, with the exception, I believe, of Amazon's second age Lord of the Rings show, is fair game for them to play in. All of the characters, they can make a Gandalf movie, they can make a Gandalf video game, comic books, novels, they can do it all if they want now.
So somehow that must involve Wizards of the Coast and their Magic the Gathering.
I'm sure they were at the meeting, yeah.
Yeah. So Embracer Group acquiring Tomb Raider plus Lord of the Rings and who knows what else, but they obviously have a love for adventure.
Generally, as far as their investment in the industry is concerned, they focus on the realm of video games, which, honestly, cool Middle-earth-based video games have been rather lacking.
In the past few years, yeah, definitely.
This upcoming Gollum one isn't exactly lighting any flames.
No, Gollum, not the first character I'd want to play in a Lord of the Rings video game. Maybe they'll come out with another HeroClix.
Maybe they'll be a little more loose with the IP and let them
hopefully
adapt into some cool new models. With the upscaled stuff, I bet you would get some freaking awesome looking clicks out of that deal, yeah.
Sauron the size of a water bottle, or...
I don't know if I've ever seen a more ill-balanced set than the Lord of the Rings. Like some 250-point characters that have like 7 clicks to work with.
Not good stats.
No. But it is fun.
They were treated badly, and that's part of why I want to see them return.
Yeah, they could do better. But
anyway.
Embracer Group, yeah. You have to wonder, with all this power they wield over the Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, and the stories that can be told within that sphere, what will they choose to do first? I think there was hints they said that they would do the Origins of Gandalf movie, or potentially the individual adventures of. And there's been this ongoing gag that, you know, The Lord of the Rings done prior to the MCU was comparatively concise, doing the trilogy ordeal and pulling it off really well. The MCU, however, every character needed a movie before they could step into the big events, right? And so there was always the joke that, like, you get Aragorn the movie, Gandalf the movie, Legolas the movie, and stuff. And now, maybe that will be a reality.
I mean, I guess they can do that. I guess once you have the rights like that, you can kind of twist it into whatever it wants to be.
Yeah, what a wild move. And honestly, I believe at the least The Hobbit is 20 years out from becoming public domain. The Lord of the Rings following not too far behind that. The UK public domain laws are like 70 years or something after the author's death. Maybe 60 or 50. But it's relatively reasonable, I would think. So their time to keep this exclusive is limited in the scope that the IP has existed.
Yeah, they've only got enough opportunity to make some billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly right. Milk it for all it's worth. Yeah. 2 decades of movies and books and stuff. And it also says, of course, that if you do make a genre-defining masterpiece that completely flips the literary world and makes millions and millions of fans, that after you die, some corporation will certainly corrupt it.
No doubt.
Yeah. Exploit it.
Yep.
Twist it.
Milk it for every last dollar.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully Embracer Group knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and they come out with some products. The fans are ravenous. They'd like to see new stories and new adventures, and I would definitely say new video games or comic books. Why isn't Dark Horse publishing a story about an elf? I don't care. They can do little slices like that, but it's really it's going to be an interesting journey for sure. I don't anticipate them fully respecting the origins of that IP because nobody seems to be willing to do that.
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, I strongly suspect that they'll sub-license that out to various production companies.
Yeah.
For the purpose of creating
Dev studios.
everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, we may well see new graphic novels. We may well see
An anime.
Yeah, we definitely could see an anime.
Why not? Yeah. Actually, I think there is a Rohirrim anime. Yeah. Which sounds pretty freaking awesome. But yeah, now it's just expanded into something much more than it was prior. It's not just the Hobbit and the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, and if you wish to dive into it, the Silmarillion and the other extended works. Now it's just whatever anyone can come up with that seems to fit into the puzzle,
It is interesting, their accumulation of IPs like that. I mean, like Tomb Raider seemed like a nice score, but now in retrospect, if you get Lord of the Rings, it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do with Tomb Raider?
Yeah.
But,
small potatoes. Yeah. Laura Croft is one character.
Yeah, it's a big deal, but it isn't Lord of the Rings, which
That's
is
what
sort of
surprised
the
me.
top shelf.
Exactly. When they made this purchase, I was like, we made Tomb Raider a notable enough thing to talk about,
Right.
but this is like industry shaking for sure. And, I believe that deal has already gone through. The other interesting thing about that deal is I think they bought it for pretty much the equivalent or cheaper than Amazon bought the rights to buy, to produce their slice within Lord of the Rings. They're
like 4 episodes in the Second Age.
yeah, unspecified, space within a era that is purposefully left vague. It's very interesting to see. I wonder if Token Estate was like reluctant to give Amazon the rights unless they wrote a crazy blank check, They're like, oh, you want to do a production? That's going to cost $1 billion.
Right.
But then Embracer Group comes with an offer and they say, I think it was $750 million for the rights to do anything they want.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe they brought flowers.
Right?
They must have been pretty convincing that they would handle the property pretty,
Or Token Estate is in more desperate straits than people would think. Well, that book still sells like crazy.
They chew through Amazon's billions like
yeah,
paper
right?
through a shredder.
I don't know. Or maybe they thought that this was going to be the best offer that they would get prior to it drawing too close to becoming public domain.
Right, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Get paid out, buy a new castle or whatever, and think it's all great and good, and watch out to see what happens.
I suppose so. I wonder if any of those prior actors from the original group there in the trilogy are pumped to potentially be called to reprise their roles in an older age or something like that. Old Frodo, the dramedy.
Hanging around the Undying Lands.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not sure if those guys would come back.
No, exactly, right? Like it's just a strange
Not
proposition.
unless they can
all
somehow
around.
get Peter Jackson too.
Yeah.
If they can't,
Then he could rope them in. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So last night aired the first episode of House of Dragons, the new
Game of Thrones prequel.
the Game of Thrones prequel.
Prequels are hard to do, notoriously.
And this is what, HBO Max?
Yeah.
HBO Max coming out with a prequel. showing us some new Game of Thrones stuff. You guys saw the whole thing. I only caught like the last 20 minutes.
You did see the post-production recap and stuff, though.
I did.
That's kind of cool that they're putting in the effort there and showing off the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff.
It kind of like needed to catch you, I feel like, in episode 1, because the end of the previous Game of Thrones series was so horrendous that everybody had a sour taste in their mouth already. And it was like, I kind of didn't want to see the first part because it was like, I wanted to see like, oh, are they still watching it? Oh, if they're still watching it, it must be kind of okay.
Yeah.
I'll come in and check it out. So
Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 was the greatest media kamikaze I've ever seen. Absolutely destroyed itself in a ball of fire. Like, I couldn't even imagine how bad it actually was. I was so pumped. Everyone was. And it failed to deliver so terribly that it was, like Venom. Nobody even wanted to bite into that universe anymore.
Yeah, even in that last season, when you saw how the end was coming, you still hoped and prayed that final episode would somehow turn things around. And
instead, for like a week afterwards, I was still pointing out, like, what happened there? Like, why?
I can't sleep.
Yeah, it really bothered probably a lot of people in greater ways than it did me, but even I saw that they completely bungled it.
Yeah, we didn't have any tattoos or like weddings or anything like that.
Thank goodness.
But that all just sort of goes to show how triumphant this return to Westeros sort of had to be in order for it not to be a complete dumpster fire.
We had a few, actually, we set our expectations high.
We did.
We said that they had to really nail a few particular segments that Game of Thrones was really well known for. Of course, the political intrigue, the making good representation of the houses and their symbols and stuff, the big city shots and landscape shots that Game of Thrones did so well that added a sense of depth to the world and expansiveness. And they really needed to... I essentially said that I would be most pleased if this entire first episode was just exposition. If they were just establishing the characters and the realm and the state of things. I said if they ended it with some kind of red wedding scene where everybody dies and we don't even have a chance to appreciate these characters, then it would be utter garbage because it would show that they didn't have the temperament to be able to actually pull off the kind of detail that Game of Thrones is known for, and the pacing. And instead, they actually nailed it the whole way through. That first episode was fully satisfactory. Oh yeah, the other big thing they needed to nail was the sets and costumes.
I was going to say, they had so many extras, so many amazing, like, period-specific costumes and the armor.
Extravagant armor.
Yeah, very cool and stylized, and it worked out.
It did.
But there's no Peter Dinklage this time.
No.
Like, I don't quite know who the character is that you're meant to kind of attach to.
Well, I mean, probably the most striking character out of the first episode was Prince Daemon Targaryen, the king's brother.
Yes.
Who sort of stole the show a little bit.
Yeah. Scorned from the getting too close to the Iron Throne, but at the same time, a ridiculously compelling character who shows a violent side. And in fact, the introduction of the notorious gold cloaks of King's Landing happened in that episode, which was a big historical moment for sure. The gold cloaks are a
like
big
the City
force.
Watch.
Yeah, but they're a notable force in Game of Thrones and stuff. You know, their legacy carries forward into the more future stories anyway. And so this character is very influential, obviously, and very charismatic, and has that almost vileness, that
sadistic sort of charm
that characters in Game of Thrones often possess. But at the same time, the scenes where he shows any degree of tenderness and caring are utterly striking because of the dichotomy that he strikes within himself, you know?
Okay, so I walked in to see that character on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
That was like where I stepped in, and he was kind of being banished by the king to leave King's Landing.
Yes.
The problem that I had with it was I said, oh, that's Matt Smith, the 11th Doctor,
Yeah.
the one who took over from David Tennant in Doctor Who. And your mom was there, and she said, all I can see is Doctor Who. And I felt exactly the same way. I'm watching it, and I'm like, that's Doctor Who acting in Game of Thrones.
I suppose we have the advantage of having never seen that season because his acting stole the show. Like,
he was great.
He was amazing.
I mean, he went from Doctor Who to being an important character in The Crown, the story of the English monarchy.
Yeah.
That was so popular, and now on to this. But once you know a character or an actor really well, it does, it takes a little while for you to give up on the former role that you know them so
He does
well
have a pretty
for.
distinct face as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But it fits a Targaryen so well.
It does, yeah. He does fit the role, I believe. And George R.R. Martin said that Prince Daemon is literally his favorite character he's ever written.
Oh, wow.
And for a guy who has written so many characters, there's a lot that falls on this character's shoulders, so it needs a strong actor to be able to carry the role. And I hope that you can see past the Doctor and into the amount of effort that he's doing here, because he, as far as I was concerned, he had the most interesting prospect as a character from this initial presentation. But like Game of Thrones, I also got the sense that really the more subtle exposition of the council meetings with the king and stuff were more telltale of the future of the series than any of the big events of the first episode, just talking about the pirates off the coast and the kingdoms of the north and stuff is all leading into what will actually happen. So that when you watch this episode again, you'll say, oh, they've talked about that stuff. Like, I remember now,
Yeah, I suppose it was a little different this first episode in that when you think of Game of Thrones, you think of, oh, we're going to look at Jon up at the wall, and then Daenerys over in Essos, and then Cersei and King's Landing. But rather, this was all centered around King's Landing and sort of the forces at work there, and perhaps, where they'll be scattered off to.
It felt a bit confined, for sure, for a Game of Thrones style episode. Because, usually you're jumping to all these different settings and stuff, and they filmed all over the world in a million different places to be able to pull that off. Still, returning to King's Landing, such a famous spot, and such a iconic set.
Mm-hmm. The Iron Throne in all its glory.
It felt good, for sure. It definitely, those sweeping shots and stuff. And a lot of nice showing without telling, where, like, there's King's Landing. It looks to be in slightly better shape than we see it under Lannister rule in the, 200 years in the future or whatever. And the people don't even react to dragons flying overhead, so we know that we're deep in the height of the Targaryens. Like, there's a lot of stuff they pulled off correctly and convincingly as well. Not to mention that CG, not like, utterly mind-blowing, but totally passable for a television show like that.
For each episode being like 120 minutes. That's a lot of CG that you end up having to do, so for the quality it was, I'd say that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty fine. I mean, and there's also some cool practical effects, too, going on. I mean, they're building some incredible sets.
Yeah.
Like the Iron Throne it's more dramatic in this series than it was in the latter, or the original series.
Very much so.
Because it's on that stage, and the cascade of swords continues out and across that whole thing. It didn't in all cases in the original series.
No, it was a bit more of a singular chair.
Throne.
Yeah. But now, it commands a lot more presence. And that is a bit more accurate to the books. The books portrays it as an
even crazier,
utterly dramatic,
quite fantastic.
Throne, for sure. But, the first episode, I think, did succeed in the aspects it needed to. And I'm looking forward to Sunday evenings now. Mm-hmm. Because there's new Game of Thrones to watch.
Another one of the cool practical effects that they did was when Matt Smith's character, Daemon,
Yes, Prince Daemon.
Yeah, Prince Daemon was kind of settling the dragon.
Yeah.
And he was like up and kind of had his hand on the side of its head and on its face. They had to build that. That wasn't a CG thing. There was a large set piece that they were interacting with.
Yeah, it's been very impressive for sure.
Let alone the whole tourney that the first episode sort of centered around.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah, they did a whole jousting thing.
Yeah, all that speed jousting.
Jousting, yeah, portrayed in a more back-to-back kind of sequence than I've ever seen it before, where they made the rounds and would just grab a lance and then joust at each other again and again, which seems like the most intense way you could possibly put that together. That seems fantastical in its presentation.
Right.
There's the horses would get tired.
Yeah, they actually have to pull that off.
Yeah. But it was really, really convincingly well done, and seemed like a dramatic spectacle. The whole ordeal was actually might have a bit more foreshadowing to it than you would first think. And again, they love to pull that stuff where you watch the prior episodes of a season and find all the little strings hinting towards future plot lines. But I wanted to mention that HBO, I believe, put out a trailer last night showing off their productions, closing with the first little teaser of The Last of Us, the show.
Really?
Yeah. Just like 15 seconds or so. The girl who plays Ellie is from Game of Thrones, actually, funnily enough. Yeah. She played the little Mormont girl.
Yes,
from Bear Island.
That's cool.
Who became a fan favorite and stuff, and I'm sure she got a lot of connections at HBO, and she's well cast for it. And she gave one of Ellie's classic lines during that, which sounded pretty good. I always give leeway to younger actors and stuff, but Pedro Pascal responded with one of Joel's lines, and he sounded exactly like Joel.
Really?
Exactly like him. I was just like, oh, this might be really good. But the amount of productions that HBO showed off in that trailer was mind-blowing. There was like 30 plus.
Wow.
And they all were like really high-quality stuff. And it makes you think that maybe HBO used to have kind of a pedigree of quality. Maybe they're just going to continue that and blow Amazon and Hulu and Netflix original productions out of the water with their live action stuff,
Seems like they could so far if they can nail this Game of Thrones.
This could be the first stepping stone to getting everyone's trust back.
Then they'll do the Jon Snow series where they fix the original.
Wouldn't that be wild? Yeah. I saw a proposition online that this Kit Harington pitched Jon Snow series is actually going to do its best to mend and hammer out the kinks of season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones, so that you can look back on it with at least a passable taste in your mouth.
I'm still personally okay. So for this new series, though, you got Matt Smith's Daemon Targaryen, but I'm still waiting to see who is the Peter Dinklage, who is the Jon Snow.
The Kit Harington.
Who am I attaching myself to that you end up going, boy, I hope they don't get killed. I hope they succeed.
Yeah, they haven't quite had the time to establish the full stage of characters.
Oh no,
yet.
we probably haven't even seen that person yet.
No, exactly right. But they also do a good job. I was thinking one of the things that Game of Thrones really focuses on is making the pitiful important, and or the unexpected and downtrodden become the key player,
such as the lowly born knight winning the tournament against Daemon Targaryen, or what have you.
Or Rhaenyra, is it?
Rhaenyra,
yeah. Being the cupbearer, always such a it's a servile role, but you're exposed to
all the inner workings of the
kingdom and the council,
king,
and exactly, and the governance of the realm and stuff, and so that just lends to that theme very well of the small and pitiful being the key player and the unexpected source of story.
And that about does it for this one. If you like hanging with us, please subscribe through your favorite podcast directory. Join our Discord and check out our shop, the Freakopolis Geekery. See you next time.